Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are going to be going over the Los Angeles Kings and what I think of the Los Angeles Kings going into this season. Can they make the playoffs this year? That was a big question going into this season, and now there seems to be a little bit more going on behind the scenes. As obviously the injury in the preseason to Drew Doughty, how is that going to affect the Kings' success this year? Obviously, it's going to play a factor, but do the Kings have enough depth behind Drew Doughty to weather the storm for whenever he may come back? So we're going to discuss that today. So obviously during the preseason, Drew Doughty gets injured against the Vegas Golden Knights. You can see it quickly here, just for context. Pretty weird collision with a former teammate there, Tanner Pearson, and he had surgery the other day, and is month to month. He was placed on the LTIR the other day with Arthur Kaliev before the season. And right now, the Kings seem to be running their 24-man roster, 13 forwards, 8 defensemen, and 3 goaltenders. So that seems to be the direction the Los Angeles Kings will start the season with, obviously without Doughty and Kaliev. So now that we're kind of getting more in terms of maybe the length of Drew Doughty's injury, who is going to be able to come in and kind of take the reins, per se, on that blue line for the Los Angeles Kings? Because obviously those are ginormous shoes to fill. Talk about Drew Doughty, a guy that's been really one of the big faces of this franchise really over the last decade. And I think we're going to start to see, as Drew Doughty gets older and the team starts to evolve, we're going to start to see other players step up. And as much as this is a loss for the Kings, this is a great opportunity for another defenseman on the Kings roster to step up and really sort of take that role, at least for a short time, until Doughty comes back. So looking at their group right now on the blue line, you've got Mikey Anderson and Jordan Spence as your projected top line. And then this is where you start to see a little bit of that lack of depth come in. So you've got Vladislav Gavrikov and Kyle Burroughs as the second pair. I don't expect this to be their roster on opening night, but this is from what we've seen in the preseason. So go with this with whatever you will. And then you've got Joel Edmondson and Brandt Clark on the third pair. So there's definitely some holes there, right? And obviously the injury to Doughty plays a ginormous factor in the Los Angeles Kings roster right now. And when you really think about it, who's the guy that's going to step up? It's pretty easy when you look at it. It's Mikey Anderson. Mikey Anderson has been an important part of this blue line for the last couple of years now. And I think this is his opportunity to really step it up. And, kind of coming right into the show, a guy like Brandt Clark, he's probably going to have to play a pretty prominent role here as well. It's one of those things where, send him right into the fire, right? Put his feet out there, see how he does, and kind of go from there. And I hate to say sink or swim for Brandt Clark. I think they're going to try and, hold back his minutes as much as they can. Obviously, here on the roster, they have him on the third pair. So maybe there is a little sense of that. Like, we're going to try and take our time bringing him in. And that would definitely make sense for the Los Angeles Kings. There's no need to rush a player that may or may not fully be ready. So for the Los Angeles Kings going into this season, right, we knew that the expectations were hopefully they get back to the playoffs. And a lot of people, including me, might even think that they might even take a step back from where they've been the last couple of years. Just considering, the Kings roster didn't get all that much better. Now you have the injury to Drew Doughty on top of that. And then you have the other teams in that Pacific Division that I think are going to get better. I think, teams like the Anaheim Ducks and the San Jose Sharks, yeah, they might still not be better than the Kings, but on any given night when they play each other, there's a more likely chance, I think, from last year that the Kings could lose some of those games against some of those teams. I think Seattle's going to be a little bit better than they were last year. So with all those things considered, and then you consider at the top of the division, right, you have Vancouver and Edmonton. It's one of those things where for the Los Angeles Kings, they kind of find themselves in that no man's land of either they're not fully a team that makes the playoffs, but they're also not a team where you're like fully expecting them to miss either. So for the Los Angeles Kings, every point's going to matter this season. Yes, losing Drew Doughty is going to be an incredibly huge loss for them for the first couple months, but I kind of think about this with other teams as well. I made a video talking about the Canucks the other day, and The thing is too, like, yeah, Thatcher Demko's out to start the season probably, but I'd rather have a guy like Drew Doughty miss the first part of the season, come back in, maybe the beginning of, maybe in January he comes back in, optimistic, but maybe January or February, and then you have him for the playoff push toward the end of the season, going into the postseason. I'd prefer that over having to worry about the opposite, right? Where he's out of the season when you need him most in probably say March or April, right? And hopefully they're still fighting for a playoff spot at that point. So with all that said, I think, yeah, this really is going to come down to Mikey Anderson and Brant Clark really having to step up. And like I said, maybe we see a guy like Jordan Spence or Gavrikov really take on a role a little bit more than we would expect as well. But this is going to be a, kind of filling the shoes by committee. Everybody involved is going to have to step up one bit. And if all the Kings players can do that on the back end, they're going to have a good opportunity here to at least give themselves a fighting chance once Doughty comes back, hopefully in December or January. So obviously we're going to hope for a speedy recovery for Drew Doughty, because ultimately that is the equation here that really matters. They need Drew Doughty back. There's no question about that. But now that Doughty's gone, you have to think about who is going to fill that role when things get tough, when there's a little adversity already to start the season for the Kings. Who's going to be the guy to take that step? While we're talking about the Los Angeles Kings, though, I wanted to talk about some of their forwards that we're starting to see here. And what's interesting is their lineup definitely different than what we've seen over the last couple of years there for the Kings. So you've got Kopitar and Byfield as your top two centers. You've got Alex Laferriere and Adrian Kempe on that top line with Kopitar. I really like that. I think Laferriere has shown, from what we've seen from him so far, a lot to be excited about. Very much a player we expect to continue to improve and develop. Kevin Fiala and Warren Foegele, interesting. I think Warren Foegele adds a different dimension to the Los Angeles Kings forward group. And obviously Fiala can score goals. We've seen him score big goals in big moments in the past with Minnesota, with Nashville. That's one of the reasons the Kings brought him in a couple years ago, and they're hoping that he can continue to do that this season. The third line doesn't look too different either. This definitely looks like a third line based off of some of these names. You've got Tanner Jeannot, Philip Deneau, and Trevor Moore. They have to put Deneau and Jeannot together, right, just to make things difficult for the commentators this year. But anyway, yeah, I like that third line. That looks like a penalty-killing checking line. I would definitely say that's the case for the third line for the Kings this year, the shutdown line, if you will. And then the fourth line. So you've got Alex Turcotte centering that line, and then you've got guys like Akil Thomas and former 7th round pick Andre Lee making this roster out of training camp. And he's a big guy. He definitely adds size to that fourth line for the Los Angeles Kings. Hopefully he gets into the roster for opening night. He might be on this team playing on opening night, which would be great. So he made the final 24-man roster. It's just a matter of will he play opening night. We are going to see him at some point this season early on for the Kings. So congratulations to him, because that is awesome. It's great to see guys like that making it to the big leagues. And obviously shout out to the Kings scouting staff for being able to find a guy like that. And maybe he's not going to end up being a top 6 forward or anything like that, but you need those depth guys in your lineup as well with size and grit. He's definitely going to add that for the Los Angeles Kings. And obviously the goaltending, if you guys weren't sure what happened to the Kings goaltending this offseason, you've got Darcy Kemper, who they traded in the Dubois trade with the Capitals. So Darcy Kemper and David Rittich is your goalie tandem this year. Very shaky in my opinion. That's a very questionable goalie tandem, especially with the fact that Kemper basically missed all of last season injured, and when he did play, he didn't play great. So the Kings need him to be healthy. That's really going to be key there. And then from there, hopefully he plays well when he's actually in between the pipes. So with all of that said, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you guys think of the Los Angeles Kings this season? Are they going to have a successful season? Or do you think maybe this is a year the Kings are going to step back and they are indeed going to miss the playoffs? They can't overcome the injury to Doughty. Their goaltending is still a little bit suspect. And obviously, there is some questions about the depth up front as well. There's a lot of depth issues with this team. And once we start maybe seeing an injury or two, kind of like we saw already with Doughty, how is that going to affect the rest of the lineup, right? So let me know what you guys think down below. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I'll see you again next time.